Right, Roger. Now, a few weeks ago, we chose a movie. We probably had the longest title, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And today, we've chosen a movie with the shortest title ever, two letters, Us, by Jordan Peele. One of the most scary movies I've seen for quite some time.
It is quite an uncomfortable watch, isn't it? It's one of those films which genuinely scares you. And we're going to have to be very, very careful as we talk about this film today, Pascal, aren't we? Because there are certain plot twists within the film which, if we talk about them too much, it will give it away. Spoilers, I guess. And anybody who hasn't watched the film yet, who wants to watch it as a result of our discussion, we don't want to ruin it for you. So we will have to dance around the plot points a little bit. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's an uncomfortably scary film. I suppose the theme starts off almost like a home invasion type film, doesn't it? And let's face it, there are lots of those around at the moment. But this takes it to so much more detail and so much more depth that, yeah, it really does have you on edge quite a lot.
For me, what was interesting, and we will talk about the marketing in a moment, and how actually, as to your point, they kept things very low key and didn't reveal too much. But this idea of home invasion, this idea also of the way in which light was being used and sound, and the movement from those invaders, but also how it switches suddenly. It's almost like, and we'll talk about this in a moment, a tribute to many other horror movies and the horror genre coming from different cultures, including Japanese horror movies. But I've seen my fair share of horror movies, and it's been a while since I've been made uneasy and unnerved to the degree that Jordan Peele did in this one. So it begins as a kind of family story. They're going for a break as parents, two children. They're going to Santa Cruz. We learn that it so happens to be the mother's childhood kind of town and city. And I have to say, the moment I saw the boardwalk, the amusement park, and the roller coaster, I said, "Oh no!" And I must ask you a question, Roger. Don't those characters watch horror films too? Because if they've seen Lost Boys or any of the others, they would know that this is not going to be a good place. At the moment I see a very old and ancient kind of roller coaster, I know that you're in for trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I immediately realised by watching this film. Now, let's be clear. It's set in Santa Cruz, actually Santa Cruz, the town, which exists. It's in California. And the boardwalk with the giant Dipper roller coaster, and I think that was built in something ridiculous like 1925. That roller coaster is nearly 100 years old. In The Lost Boys, as you said, Pascal, it was the same town, but I think they called it something else. It was called Santa Clara.
Correct,
But it was
yes.
it was it was definitely Santa Cruz. And I associate Santa Cruz with The Lost Boys, because I've never been there myself. When I see Santa Cruz in vlogs, as I often see it on YouTube, my immediate thought is it's Lost Boys. So when I started watching this film, I was immediately put into horror mode, even before we got into any of the horror content, because they're in Santa Cruz. Something's definitely going to go horribly wrong here.
That reminds me a bit, when you watch Scream, the very first one, and one of the characters says, horror films are like a survival guide. If you watch horror films, you will stay alive. So I would highly recommend for the characters who end up being in horror stories, you should watch more horror films. You'll know what to do. So it begins as this family outing, and they have lovely neighbors. They live in a lovely area. And the son essentially has an encounter that triggers a chain of events which leads to the intruders arriving in their homes. And from that moment on, it really changes gear completely. But as far as classifying this as a horror film, this adjective or kind of description is warranted, because the scares, the violence, the gore, everything, whilst a very clever story is being told, it's all there really.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I'm right about this, Pascal, but Is this an example of something which has a genre shift in it? It almost feels as if that part way through the film, it almost goes from what being one thing to being another. The Descent's another film that does that. It starts off
Yeah.
as people potholing, and you feel that it's all about them being trapped underground, and then all of a sudden it turns into a monster movie. On the face of it, this is a family in trouble, with family issues, going on holiday to try and sort themselves out, and then bang, it turns into a full scale scary thing.
Very so, and every time you think, well, you have a view that the movie is not going to go too far, it actually goes that far. In terms of being a horror film, you can imagine that some of the people don't make it for very long, and sometimes you go, well, no, they're going to be fine, and they're not. So what Jordan Peele has done is he has created a story that is very clever. I mean, this is a film you could watch more than once. In fact, it's also, I think, in its own way, an homage to other horror movies that he's enjoyed himself, but he's also exploring, as film directors would do, his own fears, which he has shared in the chat shows and so on. And for me, the one thing that it explores really well is obviously the fear of the dark in general, something that our ancestors had to deal with, no doubt, because back in the days of living in caves, I'm sure there was some pretty unpleasant stuff out there, crawling about in the dark. Crawling, the movements and the motions of the intruders is really got under my skin a lot. And I know that we won't be revealing too much because it's part of the marketing, but the use of the scissors, not just as weapons, but also just an item to use and to just hear the snapping and snipping of the blades to use to threaten the family. Ooh.
Yeah, and again, the intruders are all wearing, if I remember rightly, almost like overalls, aren't they? They're all wearing blue overalls, if I remember rightly, and it just creates this sort of, it's like the uniform of the intruder. It reminded me of some Doctor Who monsters from the past called Autons that used to wear overalls as well. Yeah, incredibly creepy, and it's a different sort of horror film, isn't it, Pascal? I mean, it doesn't really fit into any specific category. That was where I was going with this whole genre shift thing. It's not really a monster movie. It's not a slasher film. It's not a. It just seems to have elements of quite a lot of different things, and maybe that's why it makes you feel uncomfortable, because you're just not quite sure where it's going to go.
Yeah, it makes you uneasy all the way. And just to say that, of course, it does celebrate the work of previous filmmakers and horror filmmakers. It's not distracting. You don't spend the whole movie going, oh, here's a little nod to Jaws, here's another one to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's afterwards that it comes back. So I didn't feel I was distracted by watching the film. But it is incredibly, it's a very tense psychological horror film to me, and the ending is just quite incredible, and you keep rooting for the characters. But in terms of the way it was done, thinking that the intruders very quickly, as it is part of the marketing, we can share that, are revealed as the doppelgängers of the family. So now you end up in a situation where you have to fight yourself. It's just incredibly clever as in a way to torment your character, but also your audience.
Yeah, yeah, and as I say, we've already discussed darkness is scary. There's something scary about doppelgangers as well, isn't it? Fighting yourself, and that whole idea of opening the front door and you're staring at yourself. That is genuinely creepy, genuinely creepy. So what about the marketing? It's a little bit low key. I actually thought.
I think it was intentional. I'm going to say it was
Intentional.
intentional. Two things. It was really fast. I mean, people heard about the movie vaguely in and around December 2018 with
Yeah.
a teaser poster, which actually was very different to the other posters. And then literally the movie was released in March of 2019. So I'm going to say it was done on purpose. I think it was exactly what they wanted, because they wanted word of mouth to kind of play the big part of marketing. So yes, you're right. It was the usual, the posters, the website, the social media and so on. But I think people didn't know anything much until the South by Southwest Festival, where the actual trailer was revealed. and then elements of the story, but not everything. I think what was revealed really well was the music, which I think we need to just acknowledge. The sound design, the scissors, again, they play a part in everything, and the doppelgängers were revealed. And you kind of go, I want to see this because I want to know how this family is going to get out of this one, because this looks really quite creepy. And already in the trailer, Roger, they revealed the way in which the doppelgängers moved. There was something really unnerving, almost like they were insects type thing. So another fear from our ancestors, big creepy crawlies coming into the cave. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the music was pretty good, wasn't it? I mean, again, it added to the whole soundscape that they've created with this film. You've already said the scissors and that sort of thing, and they actually released some of those tracks in advance, didn't they, as part of the marketing of the film? And that's quite interesting, because it's not usually what you would think they would do. I mean, the music, well, okay, we'll hope somebody buys the soundtrack if they've been to the cinema and enjoyed the film, but to actually lead with the music as part of your marketing is quite an interesting approach.
And another interesting decision about the marketing, they only produced and released one trailer.
Yeah.
That was it. Now, you and I have reviewed by now 29 films, and all of them have had different trailers. Different length, different audiences, different reasons. And this one was, no, that's all you're going to get. That one trailer with all the different kind of key elements of the story. That's all you're going to get.
Yeah, and of course, we've tried very hard not to give too much away in this review here. Maybe they just thought, we can't put out more than one trailer. And even the trailer they put out wasn't a particularly long trailer, because if they actually blew some of the shocks in the trailer, then they would take away quite a lot of what makes the film get so scary. So
quite a bit.
I guess they had to really be careful with what they put in the trailer.
There was one very interesting marketing or PR stunt, you could argue. So you mentioned the music a moment ago, and we know that Jordan Peele, who, by the way, was also the director of, Get Me Out? The
Get
first one.
Me Out, yeah.
Oh, man, what a film. But, of course, his background as a producer and his many connections in the world of music, he brought that kind of hip-hop culture into the film quite a bit. But also what he did then was to invite fan art to help promote the film with a collaboration with Giphy. That's genius, isn't it?
Oh, I just love that. Again, it's playing to people's creativity, and just it brings people in, doesn't it? It creates community and it creates buzz, and that's what draws people into want to watch the film.
So people could submit fan art with a partnership with Giphy based purely on the music.
Yeah,
purely on the trailer or after they've seen the film. And if they've seen the film, what they could do, Roger, is use the hashtag #UsFirst, as in to symbolize that you've been one of the few that's seen the movie first. So again, this element of complicity with the audience is, I think, a lesson in its own right, which I think we could try and extrapolate to the world of business, everything that we do, to give people that privileged position to be seeing it first, but also then to contribute to the marketing with fan art reviews. I'd imagine that if you've been one of the first, you'll be all over YouTube or podcasting to kind of sing the praises of a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, at the end of the film, there is an incredible twist, which again, we're not going to give away, because genuinely, you do need to watch the film. And I have to say, Pascal, it's such an incredible twist, and they pull it off so well. And it still leaves a little bit of ambiguity in my mind. I've actually watched this film twice, quite close together, simply because I wanted to experience the twist again quite soon after the first time I watched it, just almost to make sure that I'd got it, and thought, oh my God, I've got to watch that again. Seriously, got to watch that again, just to make sure that I've got it right. Do you know what I mean?
I do know. It's one of those films that it's too early to be called a classic, of course. It was only released a couple of years ago, but it's on its way to becoming a classic. Two things. I think people who love movies in general will want to watch it over and over again, because to begin with, it's beautifully filmed. We've spoken about the music and the sound design, but also the story is just so gripping. And I think there'll be things you'll miss anyway the first time. But I reckon if you're into filmmaking, then you're in for a treat as well, because clearly he knew his stuff as a producer. He continues to produce, but now as a director as well, he's shown his worth. In fact, that was interesting. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why he was very happy to be interviewed as much as he did leading up to the release of the film, but also when he was interviewed, he did spend a lot of time talking about the making of the film, as well as the characters and the storyline and how good the film is.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I think if you haven't seen this film, and you're listening to the show today, just get it wherever you can find it. Netflix, Amazon, wherever it is. Buy it if you need to, but it's really well worth it. And turn the lights off, or at least turn the lights down, and get ready to be scared.
So, Mr. Roger Edwards, this was episode number 31. Thank you very much for being such an amazing co-host and taking us through the different segments. To our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for your support. Please leave comments and suggestions in usual places, in particular for the content spotlight and film marketing section. Until the next one, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni and he was Roger Edwards. Bye for now.